Welcome to Capital Outsider, a show about people and ideas outside the halls of power, exploring alternatives to conventional political wisdom.
Welcome to Capital Outsider. I'm your host, Eric Sundwall. Joining me in the studio is a very special guest, former Senator Mike Gravel.
Eric.
Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Now, you've had a very eventful last week or so. You've recently joined up with us libertarians. I can make that disclosure that I'm a libertarian. You were on CNN Sunday night. Great Newsweek article about you yesterday, an exclusive on the web. And here you are joining us for basically the libertarian Wayne's World, you know. It's great to have you here.
Well, it's been very much of a buzz, and I'm delighted. I feel like I've unburdened myself. I've got no rancor at all against the Democratic Party. I've been a Democrat ever since I was 15 years old when I was aware of politics. But the Democratic Party is really not the party that I share values with. In fact, even when I was in the Senate, I considered myself somewhat of a libertarian. In fact, in Alaska, Ken Fanning, Dick Randolph, and others, and I've been to conventions of not only libertarians, but Greens. I've actively sought their support as a senator. I was very independent, very eclectic, and did not enjoy the support of the Democratic Party when I ran for re-election. In fact, when I ran for re-election, I had opposition all the time in the primaries. So I am what I am, very independent, and now I think that I've made a move to the libertarians. I feel very, very comfortable.
You're an independent and an eclectic guy.
Eclectic is the term I love to use because you're a little bit of everything. And when you look at an issue and you look at all facets of it and you make your mind up on the issue, you see the difference. What we use parties for in politics or labels, it's to be able to say, oh, I don't know much about that guy, but he says he's a libertarian or a Democrat, so therefore I'm a libertarian or I'm for him. It doesn't mean anything because I don't have the time to investigate what this person is really about. Now, a person could be a Democrat for 30 years and a knee-jerk. Well, if in 30 years he doesn't learn enough to alter many of his views, that's very sad. And I have altered many of my views over time as I've become more informed about subjects. And I've altered them various different ways, like with respect to health care. At one time, I felt that the way to do it was through government. Not so. I now have a view that it must be through competitive forces. Same thing with education. I really have changed my view, and that must be through competitive forces. And even then, I have my doubts as to how we can address that problem. And all of this has brought me to one level. In 1972, I wrote a book called Citizen Power, and I've redone this book. And permit me now to hawk this book.
Sure.
And what it is, it's a polemic. But there's an important facet to this book, Citizen Power, because it has a solution. It doesn't just talk about the problem, and that's what politicians do. They talk about the problem, and then they end it, well, we Americans can do it. Well, that's what's this we kemosabe. We Americans can't do it because we don't have the power to do it. We give away our power on election day. And so what I'm putting forth here is a device to empower the American people to really do it. And that is the power of lawmaking. And so I have a plan here where the people can not only make laws, but repeal laws. We have, obviously, much, much too many laws in the books. And so this, I have a plan to do that. That is the solution, not just electing people to office, but empowering the American citizen to step forward in partnership with their elected officials. Then we'll be able to see some solutions.
Now, by seeking the Libertarian nomination, you're in for a bit of a different fight, I would think, than you were when you were trying to seek the Democratic nomination.
What fight would that be?
Well, you know, we're a small group of, some call us traditionalists, others call us populists. We tend to be very focused on the Ray Suarez interview on PBS. You called yourself more of a theorist than an activist, and boy, if there's any party that has more theorists than activists, it's going to be the Libertarian Party.
I'm both. I'm both. Hey, if a person runs for president, that's an activist.
But I guess what I'm saying is,
but I theorize. I wouldn't be coming out with books if I weren't a theorist.
Sure. What I'm saying is that when you go into the you're going to need to go into the Libertarian Convention, and there's going to be 1,000 delegates. You're going to have party stalwarts, activists, people who've been with the party, who may have a contingent behind them, in order, you know, who they may feel they want to nominate. You have a relatively short period of time to convince people that you're their man, so to speak. And I guess my question is, how are you going to approach that?
Well, there's no way to approach that. If a person feels that I've got to be a libertarian for 30 years before they would consider my candidacy, well, so be it. You know, if they feel it's not to their advantage to have a former senator who's well known to be a standard bearer, fine, let them continue on. They haven't been very successful with their candidacies in the past. If they feel that that's their agenda, nothing I can do about it. I feel I can help the Libertarians win the presidency of the United States. I really feel that's possible. We in this country are headed for the perfect storm. And so if they want to see a possibility of change, I think I offer that. Now, let's talk about the theories of some of the libertarian principles. I think I articulate that. Is there one principle that's any more important than what I'm advancing when I say, let's let the people decide on the policies of the nation?
I think a hardcore libertarian would respond to you and say the zero aggression principle. And the zero aggression principle is simply, and it's not necessarily something that I adhere to, but many libertarians adhere to, is that seeking policy or seeking government solutions to things based on coercion is wrong. And it's not something that libertarians want to accept in the course of public policy and in the course of deciding things. And it may not be more important than, like you say, giving citizens the ability to create initiative or something like that. But to libertarians, it's a very heartfelt thing. Now, there's a new movement.
Well, let's probe that in
Sure.
depth. If the majority of a society decides to do something, are you telling me that the minority opposes that principle of majoritarian rule?
I guess my thought to that would be, wasn't that the purpose of how the founders created the country, with a limited representative republic with an assertion of rights to the citizen?
They created a society of majoritarian rule. That's what they created. Now, somebody could interpret it and say, oh no, they created a society of anarchy led by elites. That's what we have. We have a society led by a minority of elites, and it doesn't work.
I wouldn't dispute you at all about that.
And it doesn't work. And so if those purists within the Libertarian Party don't want to change anything, fine. I'm not your candidate. Please. Don't look at me, because I want to change.
And by no means am I speaking for all libertarians.
I know that, but I know that I've had arguments with libertarians. They don't want any force. Well, fine. If the majority decides, here, there's two facets. Let's talk about the theory a moment. You got the sovereignty of the individual.
You're going way off my outline here, by the way.
That's fine. But we got the sovereignty of the individual. When that individual walks into a society, now he must live, or she must live, within the context of that society. And society is complex. So now,
but it can be differentiated from government, though, society.
Of course it
right?
can. But how is society
ruled? So the
ruled?
rules and the norms?
How is society ruled? It's ruled by the polity. What is the polity? That's government.
Frequently.
No, there's no other way. Society is ruled by the polity. You've got other elements of society, religious institutions, private institutions, but the polity is what we call government. Now, there's no other way to rule society. You're going to have the Masons rule all of society?
Well, I think a libertarian might answer that the individual is capable of making more of their own decisions than the group, and that as long as that individual set of decisions doesn't...
Who's going to pave the roads?
Who's going to pave the rest of the... Quite frequently, all we do is just pay contractors to do the roads, right?
No, fine.
There were over 400 roads, independent turnpikes from the year 1800 to 1840,
Good.
right? I mean, it can be done. It's possible.
Well, no, it's possible to turn back the clock. But I don't think Americans want to turn back the clock. And so if you're going to present a platform seeking to take over control of the White House in the United States in the 21st century, and you've got an archaic colonial platform, then don't waste your time or money proposing these kind of things to the American people. Save your money and become a Jeremiah Johnson by going back to the wilderness. I mean, you've got to bring things up to speed and recognize that we have a complex society and recognize that we have got to take the complexity of society and as much as possible take away the force of excessive government. You want to diminish the size of government? You can't do it with the political parties, whether it's the Republican Party, Democratic Party, or raise the Libertarian Party to the level. Here, I'll make a prediction for you. You give the Libertarian Party the same power of the Democratic Party, and it will be as oppressive as the Democratic Party. Power corrupts, and it'll corrupt the Libertarians as much as it corrupts the Democrats. So please, don't place the Libertarians holier than thou. They can't. What you want to do is you want to understand the need to have individual sovereignty and the sovereignty of the majority of individuals in society. Majoritarian. Because if you don't buy majoritarian rule, then you're buying into minority rule, and that's what we have today in this country.
How do we protect the minorities in a majoritarian
You protect
system?
it by law. There's no other way. There is no
Which
other way.
is what the founders
Respect
did, right?
for the law.
The founders
Pardon
did.
me?
The founders did that.
It goes back even further than the founders.
We go to
Please.
Magna Carta and everything like that. Sure.
You go back 595 BC with Solon. He came out with the concept of law independent of rulers and its respect for the law. So we defined the law. And you can have good laws and bad laws. And if you got a bad law, you revolt against the bad law. But now that we have a society of law, and we have a George Bush who has no respect for the law. He truly doesn't. He abuses it. And that's why we need to now have a government that needs to be refurbished so we can correct these abuses. I would like to see in the Constitution redoing some of it so that you can't have a president going about and making interpretation with signing statements that he won't obey the laws that he doesn't like. That's laws by individuals. That's what the kings were used to do, and that's what George Bush does. So we got to stop that. And so, but now we have to empower the people to stop that on a majoritarian basis. Not let some individual, well, I don't particularly like that law, and I'm not going to obey it. That's George Bush.
Well, sometimes that's called civil disobedience too, right?
Well, that's fine, but that's what George Bush is doing. George Bush can go back and say, "Oh, okay,
well, he certainly
I'm disobeying civil."
He seems to have run roughshod on the whole process.
But he's doing in theory, he's doing civil disobedience. Fine, if you want to, well, he can do that.
What about the complicity of your previous Democratic opponents, like Hillary Clinton and things along those lines? Didn't they just lockstep go in with him and say, yeah, the Patriot Act is fine. We're going to authorize the invasion. I mean, I agree that the elites just go run ramshot over us, but
right.
Can a national initiative, can the people
them?
Stop that is the question.
Of course they can stop it. Of course, if you gave them the power to make laws and repeal laws.
Doesn't that require
a constitutional amendment?
Well, it requires the people in power to give that power up, though, doesn't it?
What?
And isn't that the hard part?
Hell, what are you talking about? Here, let's reason this out. The Constitution says we the people do ordain. We are the creator. Now, if we are the creator and we have to seek permission from what we create, the createe, to change what we create, then we're obviously not the sovereign creator. That logic is ludicrous. Let me repeat.
But we
if the
don't have the
creator
power.
has to get permission from what we create, then we're not the creator. Then who is the creator? It is who the founding fathers put in power back 226 years ago. And we then have no hope. The dead hand of the past, rules us forever. Now, that is not what I believe in, and I hope the libertarians don't believe that either.
I don't think that's the position that the libertarians would take.
I don't think so either.
And I guess
but then
there is an idea in third parties, is that because we don't have a chance or a possibility of control, or even winning. Well, you have single plurality districts, and it favors two parties to win all the time, right? I mean, there's a book I would recommend to everybody. It's Third Parties in America, and the idea is that the winner takes all is going to, and it started with my namesake down in Kinderhook, New York. Not my namesake, but Martin Van Buren. He started with a strong.
It started with the founders in Philadelphia in 1787.
But he solidified the power of parties to win, and especially two parties.
Thomas Jefferson did it in the first term of George Washington, when his battles with Alexander Hamilton. Please, that's where the party started. And you know something?
But in terms of what libertarians can do, and I'm not belittling or saying that, I think it's great that you're seeking our nomination. I'm trying to
get the nomination. We're trying to solve a problem. It's not me. It's a problem we face in governance. Don't personalize it. I don't care. Hey, I win the nomination of the libertarians. I think I can make a change. Don't win it? Fine. At my age, I could care less.
Right.
I don't have a burning desire. My ego doesn't need to be nourished that way. What counts is, can I offer something that will advance the nature of human governance? And what I'm trying to do is change the paradigm of human governance. And what is that paradigm? Right now, that paradigm is representative government. And representative government fails, it's broken. What you do on election day is you take your power and you give it to a politician who makes laws that you have to obey or you go to jail. And then you're standing there in your frustration saying, oh, something's wrong. And where's your solution? We want to become purist. Well, I'll tell you what, take your purist stuff and $1.50 and go buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
I'm not saying that purism is the solution.
It's not. What is the solution? Reason it out. Here, I go back to what I was just telling you. The Constitution says, we the people do ordain. That means, the words mean, we are the creators.
If the Supreme Court interprets, the Supreme Court says, the Supreme Court
cannot
I mean, the legal system, these are all well and fine things for the Constitution to say, but in practice and in reality, do we get those things?
Wait a second. The Supreme Court cannot touch a constitutional amendment. Cannot touch it. That's the reason.
So that's your to create a constitutional amendment for a citizen initiative.
That's right. They can't touch it.
Now, when you were at the Google interview, there's only, I guess, 5 minutes or so remaining for questioning and things like that. And it seemed like a sense that some of the questioning started to revolve around some of the practicality or the mechanics of this particular idea. How do you deal with those? I don't want to go into a purist pragmatic thing.
You have to go around the government entirely, because you see, you'll be sabotaged by representative government. The people in Congress do not want to dilute their power. The media do not want to dilute their power. When you empower the people, you dilute their power. The media and the body politic. So you go around the government using the precedent of Article 7. Article 7 says that when the conventions of 9 states ratify this Constitution, it becomes the law of those 9 states. We say that when the majority of the people who vote for the national initiative, the majority who voted in the last presidential election, and we had the technology to ask those people, and when they vote for the national initiative, which is a constitutional amendment, that's why the Supreme Court can't touch it, and a federal statute sets up procedures for the legislative processes of the people, when 60, which is around 60 million people, when they vote for this, it's the law of the land. The Supreme Court can't touch it. We've gone around the government, and that's it. It's a fait accompli, and now the people can repeal laws, can make laws, and they become the senior partners. And if the Congress doesn't behave, the people have the power to wipe out the Congress. If the Supreme Court doesn't behave, the people have the power to do away with the Supreme Court. But what you'll have is that the representative government will shape up. You'll have a win-win. The people will be able to make the policy decisions that affect their lives, and representative government will perform a lot better. There's only one place on earth that has this. That's in Switzerland. You have 24 states where people make laws at the state and local level. And these states have not fallen apart. And so what you'll have, if we can do this better than those 24 states, in all the jurisdictions of the United States, you're going to have what is going to become a libertarian society, which you don't have right now. Because you're going to have less government, you're going to have more responsiveness of the people. You're going to take people who've been maintained in civic adolescence by representative government, and you're going to have them maturing to civic adulthood because they're going to be taking responsibility. When you want this and you don't want to pay taxes, people are going to have to grow up and say, okay, if I want this, I got to pay for it. There's no free rides anywhere.
How does a law get proposed? Or how does a law progress?
You and I here. 10, 20 individuals say, okay, we want to turn around and have a health care system. Here, I'll tell you the law I want. I want term limits. I think power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts everybody, including all federal judges.
So you and I get online and we say, Mike Gravel and Eric Sundwall want term limits. Everybody join up in our group and we'll vote on it next week?
It's simpler than that. It's simpler than that. What we do is we have a group of people that say we want term limits. So we define it. A president, 6 years and no re-election. Congress, 4-year terms. 2 years is ridiculous. 3 4-year terms. Senators, 2 6-year terms. And federal judges, federal appeal, and Supreme Court, 12-year terms. Okay, so we call up the Electoral Trust, which is the agency that administers our procedures for us. They assign some attorneys to draft this for us at public expense, not our expense. And we look at it and say, okay, we think this is good. So now we have to raise the money to get it qualified. We can do it. Qualifying means we have to ask enough people, either through a poll or by getting signatures, which could be done electronically. Are there enough people that want to vote on this? Obviously there are. So now it's qualified. So the Electoral Trust proceeds holding a hearing that you and I will be involved in, and so will the relative members of Congress. We'll have a public hearing using the advanced technology so people on television can get their 2 cents in. Do you want to have term limits? So after that, then we take the hearing record. We have a deliberative body that has been set up in a very sophisticated fashion. They can now look at this very carefully. We can get our 2 cents in there. After the deliberative body, so you have the hearing record, the vote of the deliberative body, like a subcommittee in the Congress, and then it goes to the Congress, and they have 90 days to vote in an advisory capacity. Then after that, it goes to be put on the ballot, and people will have a week, 24 hours. They can vote anywhere in the world.
This is a national ballot?
Yep, it's a national.
Yep.
Now, in this particular case, this would be an amendment to the Constitution. You can't do this with a simple law. So then you have an election. Now, prior to that, you're going to send every citizen 15 days before the election and no earlier than 30 days. They're going to get a pamphlet explaining all of this, pros, cons, and the effect. And they're going to get that. And then you're going to have a television program produced that, you're going to have literally perfect communication. And then after that first election, 6 months later, you're going to have another election. Because when you amend the Constitution, that's very serious. And so you're going to have 2 elections before you can amend the Constitution. And if after the second election it passes, you just had term limits.
So is it reasonable to say that we could also have, like they do with European systems and parliaments, a no confidence situation with our current Congress?
That's easy. I just told you, we become the senior members. And so if you don't like what the Congress is doing, you can wipe out the whole institution. We're the senior members. But you'll see that the Congress will become very responsive. They're not fools. They want to get their paycheck. They want to run for election. And you'll see a better quality of people running for office.
Now, we in third parties always say if we had ballot access, you'd see a lot more people running
But of
for
course,
office
that's
too.
exactly what we would do.
Sure, I mean, if that was the net effect,
we would
all of
solve
this.
all of these little problems that create equality between the parties. Here, that's what you could do if you had the people in command, and that's the proposal that I have. And if the libertarians don't think that's a gift to the Libertarian Party.
Again, I don't want to be the gateway necessarily for the Libertarian Party. I will say that I'm on the national committee. I typically don't do these interviews for the presidency, but I had an opportunity to talk to Mike Gravel, and you're a maverick, and I figured I'd break one of my rules or my policies here and do that.
I'm glad you did.
It's going to give the libertarians in and out an opportunity to wrestle with some of these issues, hopefully, with this interview.
And it needs that. It needs that. We need to reason these things out, and that's why I enjoy it. As you can tell, I'm aggressive in some of my views, but I'm not right on everything. One of the beauties I like is that when people say, well, I disagree with you, Gravel, well, that's fine, because this issue is going to be put before the people, and I have my views. It could well be wrong, but you can vote against it because it'll be decided by the people. So you can wipe out my vote.
And as we start to close here, at least with my segment, Bill McMillan's going to come in here and do a second segment for. He's one of the grand old fellows from the party from years on end. So we're going to let you guys
and
wrestle
you're the good guy. He's the guy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, actually, I got into some of the bad guy stuff today too. But I just want to express my appreciation. Number one, with how you speak truth to power. When you're at the debates, it was some of the most inspiring stuff I've seen, short of maybe Ron Paul on the Republican side. You guys have been marginalized by the press and the media, but you're the only ones standing up, speaking truth to power. That alone, I love your videos. I was just showing the station manager, Todd Wilson here, Power to the People. I showed it to my wife last night. Everybody loves that video. And I got the whole thing with the rock in the water. I got it. And that was wonderful.
You must be below 40 years
so,
old.
You know,
if you're over 40, you don't get it.
I am 40, exactly. My guest has been Mike Gravel. My name is Eric Sundwall, and this has been another edition of Capital Outsider. We're going to let you close real quick here, Mike, with a closing statement. We got about 1 minute. I'm going to let you 2 minutes. We're going to let you go and do your thing. I know you don't have a problem filling up 2 minutes.
Well, I can do that really easy. I just want to advertise my book because it's so significant. It's a paperback. I didn't print it in hard copy because I wanted to make it inexpensive and within reach of everybody. You can get it by going to citizen-power.us. Chapter 2 deals with the national initiative and in great detail. Chapter 12 deals with who stole the American dream. Well, we never had it because when they wrote the Constitution, that's when they stole the dream. They took it away, the power of the people to make laws, when they all felt we should be making laws. Cicero, 2,000 years ago, defined freedom. Freedom is how you implement liberty. He defined freedom as the power to participate in power. You got to have power or you have no freedom. The central power of government is lawmaking. So if the American people are to enjoy freedom, they must have the ability to legislate, to be able to repeal laws as well as to make laws, and to be able to vote on all of the political issues that affect their lives. That's the law that I have written, designed, and it will only come into being as a result of the American people voting for it. We're going around the government. I don't trust the government that will bring it into being, but the American people can do that. And as a standard bearer for the Libertarian Party, I've got to believe that we can bring that message to the American people and they will buy into it. And that gives the Libertarian Party, for the first time in American history, to become the ascendant party of the nation. Thank you for having me.
Senator Gravel, it's been a pleasure. Again, I'm Eric Sundwall. This has been Capital Outsider. Tune in for the second version and Bill McMillan will be doing the interview with Senator Gravel. Once again, Mike. Mike, can I call you Mike?
Mike, you sure can.
It's great to get to know you, Mike.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay.